What's going on, everyone? Welcome into a Thursday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Check us out on social media, Twitter, IG at Rich Q on Q, the YouTube channel, growing exponentially at Rich Q on Q. And don't forget, every Saturday, 9 to 9:30, TV, Delmarva 14. All right, our guy from On 3 Sports covers all the college sports gamut, Nick Kosko at Nick Kosko 59, kind enough to join us for a couple moments on a Thursday edition of BYP. What's going on, pal? How you been?
Not that much, man. Can't really complain. Obviously, it's heating up for basketball, wrestling. Obviously, the college football news cycle never stops as well.
Yep.
So, got a lot on my plate, but just the way I like it in this business.
Busy is always a good thing. All right, we'll kind of run through the gamut. We'll talk a little college hoops, touch on the NBA, and we kind of got the brunt of all the monumental moves last night, or I should say about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then we'll close out with a little Super Bowl talk as well. So everything kind of, I guess you can say, fell into form the other night. Houston over Tulsa, right? Sasser has 25, so Houston gets the big win. I mean, they blew them out by 40, I think. Alabama over Florida, Miller again with 24. Iowa State struggling a little bit. They've dropped 3 of 4. They just lost to West Virginia. And then you got Purdue and Iowa tonight. And we've kind of touched on Purdue. It's so funny. Every time we talk about Purdue, they go out and they lose. I mean, we mentioned them last week. Don't be one and done come tournament time. You better cut down the nets. And then what happens? They promptly go out and they lost to Indiana. We got some good games on Saturday. So thus far, the last couple of days or so, any surprises in your estimation?
I'm not going to say I was shocked about Purdue losing to Indiana. Again, in-state foe. It was bound to happen again at some point. I know we mentioned it last week where, Purdue, they're going to have a lot more pressure on them if they basically just run out the season or win out in the regular season.
Yeah.
Then they're going to have the pressure on them in the Big Ten tournament. Then obviously they would probably be the number 1 overall seed in NCAAs as well. And at that point, it's like, all right, well, you better get to the Final Four, like I said last week. But so that might be a little bit there might be a game for where they shake the rust off a little bit. Obviously, Texas came in top 5 this week, and they lost to Kansas. That wasn't really a surprise, but it's a nice way to show that the Big 12 is really good. Is there a great team in the Big 12? I guess that remains to be seen for tournament time when we get to March Madness, after the Big 12 tournament. But the Big 12 keeps beating each other up. There's a lot of again, I guess you could say great teams, but there's a lot of very good teams in that conference right now. Texas and Kansas are obviously 2 of them. We'll see how it maps out for the rest of the conference tournament then when we get to March Madness as well. But nothing really shocking this week. I know you mentioned Iowa State already, kind of going on a little bit of a skid. They came in number 11 this week, so we'll see where they drop to. But as far as like the top 10 are concerned, I mean, Kansas will move back up. Texas won't really drop that far. I would imagine Purdue stays number 1 next week because, again, their only losses are to Rutgers and Indiana, 2 conference opponents, and Rutgers did get back into the top 25 this week, and of course they promptly lost to Indiana, who they've owned recently, but they lost to them in Bloomington. So I don't know if that's going to drop Rutgers out, just as a side note. But again, you're only lost to 2 top 25 teams this year if you're Purdue. So I would imagine your top 5 are going to look relatively the same. I know this week it was Purdue, Houston, Alabama, Arizona, and Texas. So Texas will probably drop out of the top 5 there, but I mean, as far as the top 10 are concerned, relatively the same team. So not too many surprises.
Yeah, your Rutgers squad will be in action over the weekend. West Virginia takes on Texas. West Virginia, one of those bubble teams. I agree. I kind of think everything kind of holds true to form. I think we'll kind of know once conference tournament rolls around. But I will say this. I do feel as though every time we look up, and I know it's kind of, I'm saying it ad nauseum, but from a betting standpoint, a gambling standpoint, some of these games, man, where you look at these bloated up lines, right? Ballooned up to 16, 20, 24. I mean, these dogs are covering. They're covering against a spread. I don't know if it's some of these teams are kind of taking a night off here and there. They're still getting the wins, but they're not covering the number. I suspect, obviously, it'll be a lot different come conference tournament time. And then, of course, March Madness, because, you got to be careful there, whether it's 12 versus 5, those 8, 9, those types of seedings, you kind of throw the gambling line out the window.
Yeah, one line that really stuck out to me for at least a Thursday night contest. And again, this might be just because I don't pay attention to enough Pac-12 basketball, but Arizona, they came in this week ranked 4th in the country. They're going at Cal. Cal stinks this year. I mean, they're 3-20 on the year, but Arizona, looking at the various lines, they're a 19-point favorite on the road. I mean, that's just, you would think that seems very absurd, especially in conference play, and especially when you're going on the road. So that might be the right line because Cal is not that good. And obviously Arizona is one of those teams on the short list for national title contenders this year. But I mean, again, you mentioned how from a gambling perspective, it's like, all right, do I actually take Arizona here? Do I stay away from it entirely, or is this a game where Cal is going to lose by 18 or 17 points and actually, give them a little bit of fight, even though they only have won 3 games this year? So just that was just my lone example of these outrageous lines so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, even this evening, I was 15-9, and Purdue's laying only 8 at home, and then UCLA conversely.
Mackey Arena is one tough place to play.
I know, and Oregon State, the Beavers are getting 16.5, 17. It's dropped a little bit. They have 0 offense, no depth, and yet UCLA is on the road and they're getting the 16, and Purdue is at home and they're getting the 8. I mean, it is kind of goofy. But again, that's why you have to do your research, and you got
right. And to sum it up, it's pretty rough to bet college basketball. You're basically doing a crapshoot every week, and it's like you're betting the tournament, but it's the regular season the entire time. But these lines are just absolutely absurd. I mean, obviously, some of them are justified. Like, I would imagine the Arizona line is justified over Cal just based on the way the Bears have played all season long. But I mean, come on, man. When you're looking at a 19, who knows? Maybe they'll move to 18.5, 19.5 in either direction, but it's like, are you really going to take that if you're a bettor? I mean, unless you're a degenerate, obviously, but I mean, it's wild to me.
Hey, real quick, before we hit the NBA, did you hear the back and forth between Dawn Staley and Gino Auriemma?
I came across it. I didn't actually see what happened. I know Gino it was in the middle of a post-game interview, right? Where, it was the first time UConn lost back-to-back games in like 30 years. I think it was the absurd stat, which, I mean, really, when you really think about it, I mean, that stat alone, it's like, geez, how dominant has the UConn women's basketball program been over for 3 decades, particularly under Gino Auriemma? But no, I didn't see the back and forth. I mean, you have to fill me in on that.
It was in essence that she defended the Gamecocks Tuesday after Auriemma made certain comments. Now, mind you, this is after South Carolina beat UConn. We know UConn, we know the pedigree, we know the history. They've run up the score for years on teams. They've pile-driven teams. They've just blown them out, right? Now, all of a sudden, the script is flipped a little bit, where South Carolina is getting the better of UConn. And he was just basically taking a shot because a couple of their players were all banged up. And he said, it's just appalling what teams do to her now. He said, it's not basketball anymore. I don't know what it is, but it's not basketball. This referring to, I believe, their guard, Lou Lopez, and I can't pronounce her last name, but she had bruises all over her body. Basically it was a physical game, right? So Staley basically calls him out and comes back and says, we're called something other than players that are, quote, locked in. And listen, I agree with her, because for all the years that UConn was destroying teams and running it up and the fakeness of one Gino, all-time great coach, but the nonsense. You got a Philly tough kid in Dawn Staley. And I just thought it was comical because eventually you eat the bear, right? The bear was eating these guys.
Right. You can't be on top forever. We know this. I mean, it's very rare that someone can retire or leave the profession on top, whether you're a player or a coach. I mean, we've seen it, it's far too far in between when it comes to professionals doing that. I mean, the one example I can think of, Peyton Manning, he went out on top. He retired on top of the Super Bowl. John Elway did the same thing. We're talking about quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, for coaches, it's almost like you never know when to step away. I'm not saying Gino should step down or retire at this point, because I mean, obviously UConn is still national title contender year in and year out, because he basically gets a whole new starting 5 every year in his recruiting classes that could, bide their time in the program, or obviously step in right away. And we know how we know how women's basketball works, where you have to be in college for 4 years before you go pro. So I mean, that's why he's been having these extended periods of dominance as well. He's recruited at a high level, but I mean, it could be a changing of the guard. I mean, Dawn Staley is a great coach. South Carolina is a fantastic program underneath her. So I don't know too much about it. Obviously, I don't pay attention too much with all the other stuff on my plate, but I mean, I would have to align with Staley there as well, because if there is a changing of the guard in women's basketball, as we've seen it before, where, Tennessee and UConn had a lot of back and forth, and there was always that mutual respect between Gino and the late great Pat Summitt. But obviously, I'm sure they jabbed with words on and off the court as well. And obviously, Stanford's been great for a long time. Notre Dame and Baylor have been other great programs as well in women's basketball over the last 10, 15 years. So It's just the fact that Gino has to deal with another rising program and another program that's being coached by a great coach, and maybe
Yeah.
Dawn Staley is the next dominant force in women's college basketball.
Everything comes full circle. Many moons ago in the 80s, it was Louisiana Tech. Then you mentioned Tennessee. Then all of a sudden UConn, and then Baylor, and then Notre Dame, and now it's South Carolina. So, all right, from the college hardwood to the NBA, Kyrie out. See you later. Gets shipped off to Dallas, and then the blockbuster deal last night. Kevin Durant out of Brooklyn, goes to Phoenix along with TJ Warren. So this is what you're giving up, right? 2023, 2025, 2027, 2029, 2028 is a swing pick, or a pick swap, I should say, plus several players. I know Crowder was moved earlier today. KD, Booker, Paul, Ayton. I mean, listen, this experiment of the big three, I'm not even going to mention Ben Simmons. You can go back to Harden, Kyrie, and Durant. Simmons, the transcendent player. How's that working out for you? They played 16 games together. I mean, is this not the biggest implosion in NBA history of this super team that just fell flat?
I mean, it's got to be. And I almost want to say the era of the big three is basically coming to an end, because, again, this could be a short-term thing with Phoenix right now with Durant, Chris Paul, and Devin Booker. Obviously, throw DeAndre Ayton in there. But so the Phoenix is now the super team. And I think at this point with Durant and that type of lineup, I know they gave up a lot of pieces to get Durant, but it's like at this point, Phoenix, you better win the NBA title this year if you have Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, and Devin Booker all on the same floor. But then to your point about the Nets, on a side note, and it is kind of related, is that the Nets have just gotten fleeced. This is the second time they've gotten fleeced, or they've gone all in on an experiment. If you remember, the Chris Paul, not Chris Paul, I'm sorry, the Paul Pierce and the Kevin Garnett experiment from the Celtics to the Nets.
Yep.
The Celtics used all those picks over the next couple of years to rebuild into almost what they are today under Brad Stevens, and now under, I don't even know the head coaches anymore, because obviously Ime Udoka was out after 1 year due to his off the court transgression. So, but the Nets seem like they're cursed, because they went with the older guys in Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, and they tried this big three experiment where they get Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving first, and basically Kyrie Irving's there and Kevin Durant wants to go to Brooklyn because of Kyrie Irving. That never works out. They said, "Oh wait, we'll bring you James Harden as well." Big three. You mentioned 16 games together. I mean, how does that not work? I mean, again, I think it's a clash of personalities. I mean, I think Kyrie's a big locker room cancer, to be honest with you. So I think this is going to be a short-term experiment in Dallas, if you ask me. I doubt they'll come to a long-term extension. Even if they do, Kyrie's going to want out in a year and a half anyway. He's going to keep jumping from team to team. He's a typical locker room cancer that like we probably have never seen something like this in quite a while, but it's just more exposed due to the digital age and social media, and everyone can actually see it. But I can't remember the last time something like this blew up so badly for one NBA franchise. Yeah. And just to wrap up my point about the end of the big three. I'll use the Sixers as an example. They just have it's Joel Embiid and James Harden. You can throw Tyrese Maxey in there as well, but it's Embiid and Harden. For the Lakers, it's LeBron and AD. We see how that's working out. The Celtics, it's Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And then you throw in some other great pieces as well. But it's basically going back to the twosomes now. Because, we went back to you go back to the early 2000s, and it was Kobe and Shaq, right? Partners like that. Or after that, it was Kobe and Pau Gasol, then other pieces. The Miami Heat, Dwayne Wade and Shaq. And then LeBron set the new precedent of the big three when he went to Miami, and then everyone else tried to duplicate that. Golden State Warriors originally, Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. I should say Steph Curry first, obviously, but then they added Kevin Durant for that short championship run as well. So I think we're seeing the end of the big three, at least for now, I would say. But now you're going to go back to more teams being competitive with two superstars. But I think Phoenix is the lone exception, only right now for the short term, for the last couple of months, because they made this blockbuster move. But who knows how long that can last? But I would say this blow up of the Nets is ultimately going to say, you know what? Any NBA team, if you bring in two superstars, you have a chance to win, because there's so much more parity around the league.
Yep, should be enough. By the way, that's Joe Mazzulla. That's the name you're looking for the Celtics, who, by the way, they are plus 280 right now. Bucks plus 420. Suns have left. They've leapfrogged about 5 teams at plus 460. And to your point with Kyrie, think about this. Plays with LeBron in Cleveland, doesn't work out. I want to get out of there. Goes to Boston, inconsistencies, the injuries. It doesn't work out. I want more of a role, a more defined role. Okay, then turns around. Let me sign with the Nets. Doesn't work out. So That's a player that he'll be that vagabond. He's going to jump. He's going to jump. He's going to jump. And if you're KD, you start to get into this category of, and we'll segue it into LeBron in a moment, where, where do we define you? When it's all said and done, what uniform are we defining you? What player are we going to, what franchise, when you think about it? Because look at how OKC, Golden State, now Brooklyn, now Phoenix. I mean, this is the new era of the NBA. If you can't beat them, you turn around and then you join them. And in this case, he won it out, which really begs the question now. This is the difference between the NFL and the NBA. The NBA, when you have players that gripe, bitch, whine, and complain, the owners take a step back and they submit. Okay, the NFL sits there and says, yeah, so what? Unless you really make a stink and you're trying to fleece another team by jettisoning a player, you're not going to get moved.
The NBA is a big-time players league, in the NFL it's not like that because, again, you have bigger rosters. It's a more injury-prone sport, and despite the fact that, the NBA players seem to have all this load management and still get hurt anyway. But the NBA is such a players league because one player can change the fortunes of an entire team. Essentially, if you're a superstar in the NBA, I'll liken it to a quarterback in the NFL. A great quarterback can turn you around. One great player in the NBA can turn you around. That's the entire team. But there are so fewer great quarterbacks in the NFL than there are great players in the NBA that can turn a team around. So
quarterback makes you competitive. NBA, you can win a championship.
A quarterback can make you competitive. Can you win you a championship? Maybe, but you need a whole team around him. That's what they call it, the all-22. For the NBA, a Kevin Durant can go to pretty much any team and make them a legitimate playoff contender. I don't know about title contender, but he could turn them around more so than a quarterback can turn around an entire football team. So that's the way I liken it. But NBA owners will take a chance on it and they'll say, can we get a Kevin Durant? Absolutely. We'll try. That's why there were rumors of, well, will the Celtics trade for Kevin Durant? I mean, I knew there was going to be rumors about Phoenix, and of course they ended up pulling it off. And now the Nets are left with Ben Simmons and a bag of beans at this point. So you look at the rest of the NBA, you get one great player. That's why it's like, imagine LeBron just went somewhere else. I'm not saying he's going to go, and he's not going to lead the Lakers, obviously, and they made moves to, help their situation right now. But just imagine if LeBron went to Philadelphia. Imagine he went to I don't know, Miami. If he went back to Miami, or if he went to Milwaukee, or if he went to Boston. Can you imagine if LeBron was on Boston right now? That team would be the extremely heavy favorite to win it all. I don't care if Kevin Durant's playing for Phoenix with the way LeBron's playing right now. So that, I mean, again, it's more of me making this take on a surface level, but that's why this player movement's so down in the NBA, because you get one great guy, NBA owners are going to sign up for that. Just like that, they'll trade assets if it means this one guy can give you a chance to win a championship later this year.
Yeah, and going back to Kyrie, when you think about it, I mean, the Lakers had to make their moves. Okay, I get it. They're not going to win anything. We knew that Westbrook was going to get traded eventually. We saw Portland send Hart to the Knicks for I think Reddish in a future first. Kyrie, when you look at guys like Randy Moss, Chad Johnson, Dennis Rodman, Terrell Owens, they look like a choir boy, right? Because everything's set up. Think about it. He's got Hall of Fame talent, but he is arguably, you can debate, and I don't even know if I want to argue it anymore, but the most selfish, probably NBA player over the last 25, 30, 35 years. When you think about it from a team standpoint where everything has been set up, we've given you all the tools to succeed. We've given you great complementary pieces, and somehow you still can't make it work.
Yeah, I would say so. I haven't seen anybody quite like him from a talent perspective, combined with the selfish perspective. And it's amazing because we never would have thought this when he was in Cleveland with LeBron. They win a title. People almost forget. I mean, everyone talks about the LeBron chase down block. Kyrie Irving hit the game winner. I mean, again, people don't forget it, but Kyrie Irving hit the game winner in that game, in Game 7, to beat the Warriors on the road, to come back from 3-1 down, and then gives Cleveland their first and only championship, with LeBron. And at this point, it's like, how can you remember Kyrie Irving for that? You can't.
Yeah, you can't.
You're only going to remember him for forcing his way out of Cleveland. LeBron took a dog Cleveland Cavaliers team after he left back to the finals, but of course they ran into the buzzsaw that was Kevin Durant twice. And then LeBron ends up going to the Lakers. But at this point, you're going to remember Kyrie Irving wanting out for not wanting to play with LeBron for some reason, despite the fact that Irving was the hero of that Game 7, goes to Boston, doesn't work out, and he's lied every time. He's like, I don't want to leave Cleveland, leaves. I don't want to leave Boston. I want to stay if you guys will have me. They wanted him. Like, now I'm okay. I want to get out. I want to go to Brooklyn.
Right.
I want to team up with Kevin Durant. Nah, I've been disrespected here the entire time. Well, he's brought it on himself
No
every
doubt.
single time. That's why I mean, I laugh at his comments when it comes to what he's doing in Dallas, how he said he felt disrespected by Brooklyn and how he is more
Come on, that's
welcomed in
nonsense.
Dallas. But it's unbelievable to him because, I mean, again, regardless of what you think about how COVID and the vaccine was handled over the last 2.5, 3 years, he knew the rules. He knew what he was doing by not getting the shot. And again, I don't care about his stance at all on that, but from that perspective, you know what you're doing to your team. You know what the public backlash is going to be.
Yep.
You know who you play for. You cost yourself basically half the season because you didn't play any of the home games.
Yep.
And then you basically ruin your relationship with Kevin Durant as well as James Harden, forced the Nets to say, you know what, we're going to trade James Harden to a division rival in the Philadelphia 76ers. And now you're thinking, all right, the way he played this year, it's like, all right, he kept his mouth shut. And the anti-Semitism thing, I didn't even bring that up either. And then he's playing his best. Rich, he was playing his best basketball in years this year, and he's like, "Yeah, just kidding. I want out of here." Where does this come from? I'm baffled by this.
His chances are going to run out once the quality of play starts to go down drastically. He'll be out of the league. He'll be a backup, and that'll be it because no one's going to want to deal with the constant crap.
Right. Well, he's not worth having.
No,
without that talent. That's why I got. I mean, again, I don't blame Mark Cuban for taking a swing at him and trying to get him into Dallas. And obviously that now they have him, they're trying to pair him up with Luka Doncic, because without Luka Doncic, what is that Dallas Mavericks team?
Nothing.
And again, this is coming from my surface level knowledge of basketball, but without Luka Doncic, that team looks like it's a middle of the road, if not non-playoff team without Doncic. Now you have the two of them on the floor together, and then you can have them, rotate in and out in terms of one of them running the offense. That team is pretty good, and the West is so compact between, I think it was second place and 13th place, which is why the Lakers made a move, because they could still sneak
several
into the playoffs
games
and maybe make a run. But I mean, at this point, it's like I don't blame Dallas for trying to make this work, at least maybe even for the short term, to get something out of it. But I mean, he's going to be gone in a year and a half. I mean, I'd be shocked if he wasn't.
No, I agree 100%. Couple minutes with On 3 Sports' college sports insider, Nick Kosko. As always, give him a follow on Twitter at Nick Kosko 59. Thursday edition of BYP. Don't forget, every Saturday, 9 to 9:30, TV 14-1 in Delmarva. All right, a couple days away. It does not seem, maybe it's me because of all the NBA stuff and the drama and the nonsense, I don't sense a lot of juice, a lot of buzz with this game on Sunday between the Eagles and Kansas City, Super Bowl 57. But I will say this, as we kind of inch closer towards the game, whether Mahomes is going to be 100% or if he's still going to be 85, 90, a little bit compromised, I still am adamant on my stance that this game will be won and lost in the trenches. And if you peel back the layers a little bit, peel back the curtain, and you look at mano a mano, man for man, the Philadelphia Eagles are just more talented and deeper in the trenches. And I think they're going to be able to dominate portions of this game. I still haven't gone on the record to make a prediction, but I think that's where the game's going to be won or lost.
Yeah, I think that's what it's come down to for every single playoff game for the Eagles and how they've won every single game this year. Obviously, you get an MVP level performance out of Jalen Hurts, basically week in and week out, aside from down the stretch with the shoulder injury. And obviously the playoff games, he's been limited and hasn't looked, stellar throwing the football. And then he's shown flashes again, which is good. And he can obviously still run the football, but he's going to sell out in this game, regardless of how he feels. Same goes for Patrick Mahomes. So I think it comes down to, as you mentioned, the trenches play, and then it goes between, all right, who's going to make less mistakes? At this point, I firmly believe, regardless of their closeness to 100% health, no one's 100% healthy. We know that. But for Mahomes and Hurts, I would probably say Mahomes is going to be a little bit closer just because his injury is a little bit more recent, but it wasn't as severe as Hurts, where it knocked him out for 2 games. And frankly, he wasn't going to play in that Week 18 game against the Giants unless he had to, which he ended up having to.
Right.
And then again, you've seen him kind of be hit and miss over those 2 playoff games. But whatever he's done over the last 2 weeks to get prepared, it's not going to be as close to 100% as Mahomes is. But again, I think Jalen Hurts is going to sell out. He knows what he has to do to win this football game. And it's going to come down to who makes less mistakes. I saw a stat. I believe Mahomes has been picked off 4 times in his 2 Super Bowls, where I think he's thrown like 5 touchdowns and 4 picks. Hurts has obviously been safer with the football, but you say that now, who knows what can happen in the big game and when everything's on the line. But I think it comes down to who can dominate the trenches, who can control the run game, which the Eagles have a better run game, but I got to watch it. You got to watch out. Vineland zone and Rutgers zone, Isaiah Pacheco for Kansas City. The Eagles got to watch out for him.
Agreed.
If they can tackle him and keep him contained, it limits Kansas City's run game, and you force Mahomes to maybe play hero ball. And the Eagles are doing a good job of taking advantage of other guys trying to play hero ball. So I think it comes down to the trenches and which quarterback is going to make less mistakes. And I think ultimately that's who's going to win the game.
Yeah, Mahomes, by the way, 2 of those 4 picks came in that Super Bowl loss against Tampa Bay.
Right.
That's kind of where we're kind of drawing these parallels. As far as Pacheco, love to play or prop over 11.5 rushing attempts. I think they have to bubble screen him, get him out of the backfield.
I mean, you've seen how physical he is. He was like that in Vineland. He was like that at Rutgers.
He's like the kid in Robinson.
No qualms about lowering the shoulder and trying to knock somebody out.
He's like that kid in DC, the kid Robinson. It's so hard to tackle. And you're right, you have to be more sound. But also, too, let me bring up this point in stat. When you look inside the red zone, Kansas City's defense is susceptible to touchdowns in the red zone. They're giving up like 67%. That's a high clip. Conversely, the Eagles, they know how to score in the red zone. And both these teams understand you might be able to go up and down the field. You cannot I can't get field goals. I can't kick field goals and then have you come right back down the field and score touchdowns. I'm not going to win like that. The other matchup that worries me a little bit if I'm an Eagles fan, because I've been so, the negatives with Kansas City, but I'm just trying to lay out some of the facts. What would worry me a little bit is if the pocket starts to collapse. You mentioned Mahomes playing the hero ball where he feels he needs to make that play. We've seen the turnovers. We've seen it sometimes. But when the pocket starts to collapse, that's telling me now that he's able to get the ball down the field because all the corners and the safety guys are drifting back in the coverage. I think that's going to open up some lanes for him. And that's one of the reasons, and I'm throwing this out there, over 19.5 rushing yards. So I think you're going to see him extend drives here and there with his legs.
I could see that too. And then that's where the Eagles have, if you're going to talk about one struggling point of the defense this year, it's containing the mobile quarterbacks if they have those lanes, of course. Now, the pass rush has been so good where the pocket collapses, quarterbacks can't go anywhere anyway, or they just chuck the ball away when they're drifting back 20 yards. But if Mahomes gets out, he escapes, they have to be aware of that. And we know how Mahomes is able to extend plays. And guess who comes open? Travis Kelce. The Eagles know they have to do something with him to contain Travis Kelce, have good coverage on him. He's going to get open. We know this. I mean, at this point, I would bet a large sum that Travis Kelce is going to at least score 1 touchdown in this football game.
Pass.
Right. And who else are you going to throw to? Now, you mentioned how the red zone thing is very interesting. For me, it goes back and it's hand in hand with the trenches play here. If the Eagles are going to play ball control and do what they've done well all year, which is run the football, open up the passing lanes. Jalen Hurts gives you that dual threat ability. I mean, I'm talking about if the Eagles have the ball first, let's just say, and you come out and you get a 7.5 minute drive, you score, you go up 7-0 halfway through the first quarter. I mean, you've already set the tone. That's usually where they say, we are here. We are going to grind you down to a nub, and you're not going to be able to keep up with us because we're going to keep grinding you down on offense and defense. If we can hang out on the ball for this long, I think that'll ultimately be the tone setter in this game. I mean, if you're either team, you can't go that opening drive and go 3 and out, or maybe like 4 plays on a punt. It just can't happen.
Yeah, the Kelce, by the way, that prop is -110. I don't really like the value on that one. Not a ton of value with the juice. The other thing to keep in consideration too is you got 2 head coaches. You've got one that's still very green, and then you have one that's been there before. Now, I don't know how much stock people are putting in when you start to talk about the experience, but it's going to be interesting to see. Let's just say, for argument's sake, play devil's advocate, Eagles find themselves down 17-3 in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the adjustments, right? 4th and 3 on the 35, on our own 35, and we're down 14. Are we going for it? Right. So those are
things. It's tough.
Real quick, Nick, how much can we really say how good the Eagles are right now? Because they took care of the Giants early and they took care of San Francisco, right? And Kansas City's a different animal, but
to me, it's a legitimate question because they've pretty much gone on cruise control all season long with every single win they had. I mean, if this team went 14-3 in the regular season, they rarely trailed this year. If you're in a big hole like that against Kansas City, let's just say in the second quarter, and you're facing a 4th and 3 with, 6 minutes to go in the half. It's like, all right, Nick Sirianni, what do you do? I mean, do you pull it out of your Doug Peterson hat, so to speak, and just say, we're going to go for it? And if they go for it and get it, then it's like, all right, they'll get some juice back. If they don't get it, you're at danger of going down 24-3, 20-3 before halftime against Kansas City. And now it's like, can you pull yourself out of a hole? We've seen them, answer the call, but usually it's the Eagles boat race teams and get out to a big lead, or, they're in a tie game or ahead by a little bit early on or at halftime. And then they start wearing other teams down and winning in the end. So if they're in an early deficit, I would have legitimate questions about how this team is going to respond, because again, Jalen Hurts is not 100%. Now, do I think he can muster up a comeback? Absolutely. It's in his blood. We've seen him do it. He did. Again, it's college to the NFL, but don't forget, he came off the bench for Tua Tagovailoa in that SEC championship game the year after they won the national title, and he led a comeback against Georgia in the SEC title game. I mean, he's got that gene in his blood. He's got ice in his veins. I'm not going to deny him of being able to pull something off like that. But you make a good point. If Kansas City's up 17-3 at some point in this game, as a fan, I'm going to be like, this is kind of concerning. Can they answer back? And are you able to contain Mahomes? Because if Mahomes has a 14-point lead, he's going to turn on the juice as well. He won't mind throwing another 3 touchdowns and trying to win the game 35-20.
Yeah, and it's a different animal in the regular season. I like to say Jacksonville and Indianapolis, where you fall behind and you don't panic. You have the composure, which again should prove them well on Sunday. All right, give me your official, non-biased, objective score prediction in this game.
I mean, I've been going back and forth on it all week in terms of the unbiased pick, but I do have to roll with the Eagles. I will say it's been tough. I'm trying to determine how close it's going to be. I'm going to say Philly wins 37-31.
That's a high scoring game. So they are all right. So we going confidence level inflated up, or is it deflated?
Hey, that second ball doesn't look too deflated. So I would say confidence level as a fan, I'm at a 7.58 that they're going to win this game.
The Duke is deflated. Trust me. We did a little.
It's a little deflated. What's do you have a PSI measurement on that thing?
It's like 6.
So as a fan, confidence level probably sitting at a 7.5, 8 o'clock, a 7.5, 8 out of 10. They are going to win this game.
All right. And you got them obviously covering the number, and you have a high scoring affair, which would certainly hit the over. He, of course, is Nick Kosko at Nick Kosko 59 College Sports for On3 Sports. Does a great job play-by-play in the area. RU Wrestling as well. Cal Athletics in our backyard right outside Atlantic City. Always appreciate you jumping on board for a couple moments on a Thursday edition of BYP. Best of luck come Sunday. And I would sit here and say, I hope the Eagles come out on top, but let's be honest, I'm just not going to say that. I'll just wish you well in all your Super Bowl endeavors.
Yeah, you can't say that with that Giants helmet behind you. So
I cannot, nor will I. Enjoy the game on Sunday, pal.
Appreciate you, man.